Chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hole, the feast had slackened off. So had a lot of boats. Redwall mice and their guests sat back replete. They were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear, Friar, I want you to pack a large sack with food, hazelnuts, cheese, bread, cakes, anything you can fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse as secretly as you can without attracting attention. Poverty is an ugly spectator when a mousewife has as many mouths to feed as she does. Oh, and be sure that her husband doesn't suspect what you're doing. John's church mouse may be poor, but he's also proud. I fear he might not accept charitable gifts. Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do his abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common, an interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mouse. They had passed a pleasant evening, joking, playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered onto Matthias's lap and fallen asleep, whereupon baby Tim did likewise into the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias as she stroked Tim's small head. Ah, bless their little paws. Don't they look peaceful? Matthias nodded contentedly in agreement. Cornwall tittered aloud and remarked rather foolish, Ooh, look at Matthias and Cornflower there, and nursing those two babies like they're an old wedded couple. Well, crumble my bank. Brother Alf reprimanded him sharply. Here now, you keep a latch on the silly tongue of yours, Cornwall. Didn't you know that someday Matthias will be a Redwall mouse? And don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole, I could say a thing or two to your mum and dad. Only last evening I saw you playing catch the bulrush with that young harvest mouse. What was her name now? Colin blushed until his nose went dry. He flounced off, swishing his tail, muttering about going outside to take the air. Matthias caught a nod and a glance from Abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he disposed the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair, and went across to him. Ah, Matthias, my son, here you are. Did you enjoy my Jubilee feast? Yes, thank you, Father, Matthias replied. Good, good, chuckled the abbot. Now I'm going to ask Brother Alf or Edmund to go on a special errand, but they're no longer young mice, and both look quite weary at this late hour. So I thought you might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out a special task for me. Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. Say the word and I'm your mouse, sir. The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidently. Do you see the church mouse family? Well, it's such a long way back to home for them on foot. Good heavens, and there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you would drive them home in the abbey cart along with any others going that way. Constance Badger would pull the cart, of course, but you could act as a guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, Matthias. The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. Leave it to me, Father. Old Constance is a little bit slow thinking. I take complete responsibility. The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias marching off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip-flop, flip-flop, he tripped and fell flat on his tail. Oh dear, I have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't too big, the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living so close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit with him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mom helping Mrs. Church Mouse with the little ones, while her dad chatted away with John Church Mouse as they shared a pipe of old bracken twist. Friar Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Church Mouse. Abbot says to thank you for the loan of bowls and tablecloths, ma'am. The fat friar gave her a huge wink. All comfy back there? Called Matthias. Right off we go, Constance. The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their good nights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse. As the cart rolled out into the road of silver golden moon looked down from the star-pierced summer moonlight. Matthias gazed upwards, feeling as if he were slowly turning with the silent earth. Peace was all around him. The baby church mouse inside the cart whimpering fitfully with their small secret dreams. Constance ambling slowly along as if she were out on a midnight stroll, pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the floorboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear the gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Churchmouse, blending with the hum of nocturnal insects from the meadow and hedges on the balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that bloomed in the Abbey gardens. Normally it was in red full flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in the dormant young rosebuds, even now, well into June, a thing that only happened infrequently, and usually heralded an extra long hot summer. Old Methuselah could only remember 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he advised that they mark the calendar and in the Abbey Chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old cart rolled on gently down the long, dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouse lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly and without warning they were roused by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air with as it gathered momentum. The ground began to tremble with this rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave, her blunt claws churning the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped in shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, its eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay, but they were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavily tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons, pikes, knives, spears, and long, rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that had ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked to it. With the other was his thick, enormous tail, which cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as the horse and wagon clattered off down the road into the night. As suddenly as they came, it was gone. Matthias walked out into the road, staff in hand. Stray whiffs of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back onto the road, Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart's tracks amid the sullen dust. "Did you see that?" "I saw it, but I don't believe it." "What in heaven was that?" "What in hell, more like it." "All those rats, such big ones too?" "Aye, that was the one in the back. He looked like the devil himself." Seeing Matthias, still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. "I think we'd best head back to the Abbey," she said firmly. "Father Abbot will want to know about this straight away." Knowing that the badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. "Right, Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies," he said. "Mr. Field Mouse, Mr. Church Mouse, up front with Constance, please." Silently the mouse did as ordered. The cart moved off with Matthias positioned on the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken.